Those words came out of my father's mouth in front of 30 relatives on Father's Day, right after he opened the envelope I had spent 3 years preparing for him. But before I tell you what was inside that envelope and why it made him scream and then go completely silent, you need to understand where this story actually begins. My name is Natalie. I grew up in a small brick house in Ohio with a father who measured love in report cards and trophies. My older sister, Megan, was the golden child. She was the cheerleader, the homecoming queen, the one who made honor roll without trying. I was the quiet one, the one who stuttered when nervous, the one who loved biology textbooks more than parties. My father never hid which daughter he was prouder of. He didn't have to hide it, he announced it. Casually, at dinner tables, at birthday parties, at every family gathering. Like it was simply a fact of nature. Megan's going places, he'd say, ruffling her hair. Then he'd glance at me and just shrug. My mother died when I was 11. Ovarian cancer. Fast and cruel. After that, my father remarried within 2 years a woman named Denise who had a son, Tyler, from a previous marriage. And slowly, without anyone officially saying it out loud, I became the outsider in my own home. Tyler got the room with the window. I got the room with the water stain on the ceiling. Tyler got driving lessons. I got a bus pass. It wasn't cruelty exactly. It was worse than cruelty. It was indifference. My father simply stopped seeing me. I buried myself in schoolwork because it was the only place where effort actually produced results. Nobody could take away and nobody could redistribute a perfect science fair project to someone else's shelf. By the time I was 16, I already knew I wanted to become a doctor, not for glory, but because I remembered, with painful clarity, sitting in a hospital hallway watching machines fail to save my mother and feeling utterly powerless. I promised myself I would never feel that powerless again. I got into college on a partial scholarship. My father didn't come to my graduation. He said he had a work thing, but I later found out he'd gone to watch Tyler's baseball game instead. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself a lot of things didn't matter. That's what you do when you're trying to survive a childhood of being invisible. You build walls so thick that even you start to believe you don't feel pain anymore. Medical school was brutal. I worked 2 jobs alongside my studies. I slept 4 hours a night for years. And somewhere in that exhaustion, I stopped waiting for my father's approval and started building something for myself instead, quietly, without announcement. The way you plant a tree you don't expect anyone to notice until it's tall enough to give shade. Here's the part of the story most people don't know. 3 years before that Father's Day, I found out, completely by accident, through a cousin's offhand comment at a wedding, that my father had lost his job at the plant. He'd been let go quietly and was too proud to tell anyone. Worse, he'd fallen behind on his mortgage. The house I grew up in, the house with my mother's rose bushes still blooming in the backyard, was heading toward foreclosure. I sat in my car in that wedding parking lot and cried for 20 minutes. Not because I felt sorry for him, though I did, but because some stubborn, wounded part of me still loved him, even after everything. Even after years of being compared, dismissed, and quietly erased. So I made a decision. I didn't tell him. I didn't tell Megan. I didn't tell anyone. I contacted the bank anonymously through an attorney, and over the following months, I paid off the remaining balance on that house. Every dollar I could spare from my residence salary, which, if you know anything about medical residency, is not much, went towards saving a house for a man who once told me I'd never amount to anything. I did it under a blind trust. The bank knew me only as a name on a legal document. My father received a letter saying his mortgage had been satisfied by an anonymous benefactor, and he cried about it at Thanksgiving that year, telling everyone some guardian angel had saved the family home. I sat at that table and said nothing. I just passed the mashed potatoes. For 3 years, I carried that secret like a stone in my chest, not because I regretted it, but because I didn't know when, or if I would ever tell him the truth. Meanwhile, I finished my residency. I specialized in cardiothoracic surgery, one of the hardest, most demanding fields in medicine. I was one of only 4 women in my graduating class to match into that specialty nationwide. It was, by any measure, an extraordinary achievement. I told my father almost none of this. Every time I tried to share good news, the conversation somehow drifted back to Tyler's promotion at his car dealership job, or Megan's new house, or whatever milestone currently had his attention. I stopped trying to compete for space in his pride a long time ago. Then came that Father's Day. Denise organized a backyard barbecue, the same backyard with my mother's roses. Still alive, still blooming, a small miracle I chose to see as meaningful. Extended family came. Uncles, cousins, neighbors. Tyler had recently gotten engaged, and my father spent nearly the entire afternoon toasting him, praising him, telling stories about how proud he was of the son he never had by blood but gained by love. I sat quietly near the edge of the patio, holding a paper plate I wasn't eating from, feeling that old familiar smallness creeping back into my chest. Then my father, maybe 3 beers deep, decided to make a toast about fatherhood itself. He talked about sacrifice, about providing for family, about the pride of watching your children succeed. And then, gesturing vaguely toward me with his plastic cup, he said the words that silenced the yard. Not every kid turns out how you hope. Some just don't have it in them. Megan and Tyler, they've got drive. Natalie here, well, he laughed. An ugly little laugh. She means well. I felt 30 pairs of eyes shift toward me. Some pitying, some embarrassed. My aunt actually gasped audibly. And in that moment, something inside me that had been quiet for 30 years finally stood up straight. I walked into the house, retrieved the envelope I had brought, the one I'd been planning to give him privately later, when the timing felt right, and I placed it directly into his hands in front of everyone. Happy Father's Day, I said. Open it. Inside were 2 documents. The first was my hospital credential badge, along with a formal letter confirming my board certification as an attending cardiothoracic surgeon, a title very few doctors in the entire country hold, especially not women my age. The second document was the original mortgage satisfaction letter from 3 years earlier, with a single line highlighted in yellow, the section listing the name of the anonymous party who had paid off his home. My name. My father read it twice. His hands started shaking. And then he screamed, not in anger, but something raw and broken, something I had genuinely never heard from him before. This was you. This whole time, it was you. The backyard went completely silent. Denise put a hand over her mouth. Tyler stared at the ground. Megan looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time in her life. My father sat down hard in a lawn chair, the papers trembling in his hands. And he wept, really wept, in front of every relative who had just watched him humiliate me minutes earlier. I told everyone you didn't have it in you, he said, his voice cracking apart. And you were the one saving my house, saving my life. And I never even knew. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I simply knelt beside him and said, I didn't do it to be thanked, Dad. I did it because despite everything, I never stopped loving you. I just needed you to finally see me. We talked for hours that night after everyone left. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Those don't really exist outside of movies. But it was honest. He apologized, truly apologized, for the first time in my entire life. And slowly, in the months that followed, our relationship began rebuilding itself on a foundation that was actually real. Instead of one built on comparison and disappointment, looking back now, I understand something important. I never needed my father's validation to become who I was meant to be. The love and discipline I poured into my education, into my career, into quietly saving a home he didn't even know was in danger, that came from somewhere deeper than his approval. It came from my own resilience, my own worth, something nobody, not even the people who raised us, gets to define for us. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been the other child who tried and still felt unseen, I want you to hear this clearly. Your value was never dependent on someone else finally noticing it. Keep building. Keep growing. Because sometimes the people who doubt us the loudest are the ones who end up needing us the most. And when that day comes, you won't need revenge. You'll simply need the truth. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real, emotional family stories like this one, because healing, just like love, is always worth telling.